Hello, I'm Howie Shareff, and welcome to another show from You Call This Yoga, our internet TV talk show where we interview local, regional, national, and international leaders in accessible yoga. We're having a great season, and after speaking with Rose Kress before the show now, I'm even more excited. Our show is about accessible yoga and ways that folks are growing the awareness of the community through their practices, relationships, and resources. We invite you to engage us throughout the show, or even afterwards through our review, by calling in at 919-518-9773. You can use Skype at computers2k voice, or you can log in on the chat box on the nissancommunications.com website that you're utilizing now. So thank you for that. Usually I don't reflect back on prior shows right at the beginning of a show, but we had a pretty exceptional experience last week, and we had a witness to that show in the studio, our producer Amnon. So I was wondering how Amnon experienced the Gong Show and how viewers experienced that, because we welcome your feedback and reviews. Amnon, can you share that?
It was just, it's indescribable. My hair is still standing now when I'm thinking about it. The bad thing is that you cannot hear the right effect of the gong on the video, because it got to the point where it was vibrating so loud that I had to lower the microphones. It was tearing up. I mean, so you don't get that. I was listening to it afterwards, and I said, "Where is that point where I was going?" So it was unbelievable.
It was like the 1812 overture of yoga.
I mean, this was what, like a 2-3 feet round?
It was, I think, 30 inches.
Jeez.
Yeah, so we thank Alicia Niesenfeld of Strong Roots Yoga for participating. Alicia will be at our Yoga Fest Raleigh on June 17th at the Well-Fed Garden as part of our fundraiser. I'll be coming up. Hold on. Amnon, I think, has a picture of our poster child, Lorrange. Amnon, can you share Lorrange with everyone? All right. Lorrange is short for the Lone Ranger. She's a chicken at the Well-Fed Garden that hops over the fence, inspects the yard, and then comes back, lays her eggs in the mulch, different than everyone else. Hi-ho, Lorrange. Thank you. So on June 17th, you can come out and see Lorrange strut her stuff. But back to the show. I don't know how many hopping chickens they have in Tucson. So let's find out from Rose. Let's meet our guest, Rose Kress of LifeForce Yoga. Good morning, Rose.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. Hi, Howie. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. Do they have roosters crowing in Tucson?
It's illegal within the city limits, but there are roosters and plenty of chickens around.
Are they more wild then, or are people doing gardening, urban gardens and farms?
They're kept. They're not what we've got too many critters that would eat them. So
Mm-hmm.
there are no chickens running around wild in the Tucson area. And if they are food for somebody a little bit later.
Not for very long, right?
Yeah, not for very long. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. Uh, I know we're getting the chicken before the egg here, and that you are the egg of our show. You're the union. Uh, please share a little with our audience about your experience with yoga and what your path had started out like.
Oh, of course. I first went to yoga when I was in my teens. I had a friend say, "Oh, let's go try this yoga thing out." And so I went, and I felt really good afterwards. And like many people, I think I met Beryl Bender Birch, who wrote the book Power Yoga a couple of years ago. And I said, "Yeah, I started doing really home practice with you out of your book." And she said, just about everyone I meet tells me that, which I thought was really cool. And so I was just doing it as a means of moving my body because I have some chronic pain issues just due to how, due to genetics.
Mm-hmm.
And um, then a little bit, I would go to a class and then stop and, this class and, on and off the mat, as we say in yoga. And then in about 2002, 2003, I think I was really at a low point emotionally and physically and mentally. I'd just gotten out of a really kind of gnarly job. And I thought, oh, this yoga thing always makes me feel better. And I went to yoga class, and Amy Weintraub was there, and she greeted me. I actually was going to see a male yoga teacher because I'd never been to a yoga class with a man before. And she was just so kind and welcoming that I stayed. And it spoke to me at a level that no other yoga class or yoga practice had spoken to me before.
Mm.
And started to, that day is so strong in my memory. I remember walking. I got up at 5:30 to go to this yoga class, which was a 7 a.m. yoga class, and then went to school afterwards. And I remember walking on the campus and walking by a eucalyptus tree and smelling it as though I was smelling eucalyptus essential oil. And that sticks out of my memory as a place where I went, wow, something is really different about what I just did. And I committed to a practice, college student waking up at 5:30 in the morning to go to yoga 3 times a week. And well, it changed my life. It literally changed the course of my life and what I'm doing with my life and where I am, as well as mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, all of that. So it brought about a really big change for me in terms of my suffering and again where I'm headed in my life and my
Mm-hmm.
career, so to speak.
Hmm. Fascinating. Well, it sounds as if it was a major epiphany because you were making a commitment to yourself at a time that uh, many people could be self indulging, but not necessarily self restoring or enhancing. College is a wonderful time to explore, but it's often a time one could get a little lost or
Yes.
feel lost. So that is
Yes. And
fascinating. I can appreciate that too. I got exposed to transcendental meditation in college. That seemed to be
mm,
the time to explore these things that were being presented, and it seemed way different than anything else. Uh, it's helped my life, and it's given me a greater perspective just of being able to meditate at will, which I do a lot, especially when traveling. Traveling is a meditative adventure, so I can
mhm.
appreciate just making the commitment in the morning. Uh, Now, you said that you had met Amy Weintraub as a college student. Is that correct?
Yes.
And where was this occurring?
This was at the Tucson Racket and Fitness Club. It was just a regular gym yoga class, which there's this tendency that I've witnessed among yoga teachers to look down their noses at gym yoga like, oh, well, it's just stretching, it's just exercise, it's nothing. Um, Nothing profound. And I often say, well, no, 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 no. You can find profound things in a gym yoga class. And it wasn't LifeForce yoga at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It has become Life Force Yoga,
Right.
but she was always weaving in tools for depression and anxiety, which at the time I was having some severe, not at its most severe, but some pretty severe anxiety stuff going on and obsessive compulsive disorder. And I was on the edge of slipping into the hole of my compulsions, and that's why I was going to yoga. I just went, well, this made me feel better that when I was practicing, so let me try it again.
How did your peers uh, practice or not practice? Were you alone in this pursuit, getting up early, or did you have cohorts
Oh,
and support?
no, I did it by myself,
Mm.
which I didn't have any friends who were really into it, and I was an unconventional college student as well. So I was in my mid 20s by this. I mean, I did my gen ed basically, and then went and had a job for a couple
Mm.
of years, and hit the ceiling in terms of where I could go without a degree. And so then that's when I went back to school, and I went. I was like, this is all I'm doing. So I went to school 40 hours a week, and I stayed at school. And, it was great. I didn't have homework at home or on the weekends because I spent my time at school doing all of that homework. And 3 times a week, then I added in the yoga. And that just made a huge difference in my ability to focus, my ability to study, my memorization skills, my energy at school. Why it's not mandatory for college students, I don't know. Should be.
Well, mandatory can be sort of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
There'll be yoga until morale improves
There you go.
or
Love that.
diminishes. Uh, well, and it's an interesting thing too, because some of the emotional issues that you are negotiating could also help foster just being in a practice, and that
Hmm.
sort of uh, slightly obsessive or this compulsive of this is beneficial, the mindset,
Hmm.
and turning yourself and focus into that channel. Uh,
Yes.
so that's fascinating. So I think some of the things we want to share with our viewers and listeners is that teachers, isn't it fascinating that Amy Weintraub was a gym yoga teacher, weaving her concepts in the channel that was applicable to her life at that time 15 years ago. She's not on the show, she's in another element of her life, but just referencing that and the perspective of that, and even students that there's more out there than is really clear at the moment.
Hmm.
We're having a little reverb here in the studio, so Amnon's looking around, and so if you hear a little reverb, then we'll figure it out soon. Sorry about that. Reverb, burb, 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 burb. Just playing, uh, because it's a show about your mind too. Uh, in this practice, when you were at the gym, how much focus on breathing and meditation was occurring?
Well, the breathing practice was woven into it, and that was something that I had never experienced before, was all of these different breathing practices. So we would start with some centering and intention setting almost right away. And then the breathing would be woven through. Sometimes there would be a breathing technique at the beginning and maybe in the middle and then maybe at the end. But also, really unique to the practice was the sound woven into the practice. So
Hmm.
lots of toning. Um, some of you yogis out there might know it as mantra, and the mantras for the chakras and other sounds, but basic toning, so making sound in yoga poses beyond om, and then pausing to really receive. So, in that sense, the meditation gets woven into the practice as opposed to, you ask somebody with an anxiety disorder to watch their thoughts, they get more anxious because those thoughts are anxious. Or you ask someone who's depressed to watch their thoughts, and there's this spiral into a darker place because those thoughts are dark. And in this way, the meditation was happening throughout, and there'd be this sense of an hour and a half, a 90-minute yoga class, and wait, it's time to relax already? Oh my gosh, how did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Where the mind is so focused and so present on what's happening that the passage of time becomes, um, well, it's become sped up, right? Theory of relativity, but uh, so
Mm.
it's that practice woven in made it more accessible than meditation, which prior to that I was like, yeah, forget that. That's never going to happen for me.
So
And
it's as
suddenly it
if,
was.
so there's nuances for teachers to stay aware about, and also for students that if something just doesn't feel right, it's worthwhile sharing it with your teacher or whoever's giving the lesson or however you're gaining this perspective. Speaking of perspectives, we're going to start moving towards our first pearl of wisdom that Rose has prepared for us by video. So Amnon will be queuing that up in just a moment.
This is a hand gesture that supports balance and a full breath. Bring the fingertips to touch, all of the tips of the fingers touching. Allow this to rest maybe in your lap, maybe in front of the solar plexus or the heart. Allow the eyes to soften as you find a nice, easy breath. As this mudra supports balance, you may even wish to cultivate an image that represents balance, maybe from nature, maybe from your life. Taking nice deep breaths in and out. You may even notice that you have greater access to a bigger breath. Practice this mudra anytime you need to feel a little more balance, even a deeper breath, practicing for a minimum of 30 seconds or 5 breaths or longer if you wish.
I love that pose. I live in that pose. And then my wife pointed out to me that my father does the same thing. So I don't
Mm.
know if there's an environmental influence, coincidence. I can't say my father's a yogi, but he's definitely speaks with his hands. So maybe this is his way of keeping his hand lips together temporarily. For me, I love that pose because the elbows are by one side and the fingertips are grounding. The wrists are soft. And I use that as an alternative for prayer pose. I have
Mm.
issue with prayer pose where the wrists are bent. The hands could be flattened. The elbows can be flared. And I have a belief that prayer pose constricts breathing rather than fostering it. So back to you, now that I spewed all my love about
Can I
that.
break in a second?
I guess you did.
Rose, are you
Yes.
hearing Howie really loud in your headphones?
Yes.
Yes, you need to turn it down. That's where we get the echo. Turn down the volume of the speaker
Okay.
on your machine just so you can hear, but it shouldn't be too loud because it feeds back into the microphone.
Ah, okay.
Okay?
Mm.
All right.
These
Keep going.
things are so sensitive.
Yes, down in the valley.
Yeah. Yeah, I love mudras or hand gestures, and I think we're coming into them so often. You know, peace sign, that's a mudra. And
Mm-hmm.
it really does kind of, sometimes it's called Happy Buddha Mudra because it kind of uplifts the energy and brings things up and brings the breath up. And you think about why we were using the peace sign is it's about cultivating peace. And hey, look, it's a mudra that cultivates peace. So there are a number of mudras that I think people come into on their own. And I love this one. It's called Hakini, if anybody wants to know, but balance mudra is fine. And I see pictures of people doing it all the time. And this one is so accessible because it's just the tips of the fingers. I mean, it's one of those you can do at a meeting with somebody when you just need a little more focus and balance. It's that, maybe we just take 5 minutes to sit and, visualize and do a little meditation practice with this. But yeah, that sense of grounding the fingers and being I love this one for people with arthritis because there doesn't have to be, I mean, the mudras get really complex and and the wrists get funky and if you can't bend your fingers in that way, then that mudra then becomes a little more inaccessible and you're less likely to try it. But this, everybody has done this at some point. And the coolest thing about mudras is that for people that are actively missing a finger, um, the mudra still works, they say,
Mm-hmm. Well, it's
which is,
about the intention too of
mhm,
directing the prana and focus and the breath into these elements of our physical or
yes.
perceived physical or residual or whatever was that the being of wholeness. Uh, I had taken a class at the Accessible Yoga Conference this weekend, and the last session I had taken was about uh, long-term illnesses and chronicity and the breathing and the elements there. And then earlier there was a program on amputee yoga,
Mm.
and that sense that we're trying to keep that sense of wholeness and the extension of intention and prana and breathing to the whole perceived self,
Yes.
whatever that self is or was. So that's pretty fascinating. Uh, how about in this balancing pose, might you consider, even I'll put my hands up, even spider push ups? Because I think of this also as part of an asana where I'm actively trying to disarticulate the palm pad, thumb pad, finger pads, working up the fingers to the tips as the inhale, and even articulating down, closing, elevating the palm pads away from each other as the palm pad, thumb pads, I mean, the arches
Mm.
elevating away. So I love that too because it is a way of having a physical practice with the focus and the breathing.
That's great. I love that. And I'm going to use it.
Okay, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
uh, what other mudras do you feel that might be contributing to mood balancing?
Mm.
Any other come to mind, or any elements of the
Yeah.
hands?
There's one that I personally just love, and I realized it was one I was actually doing for a very long time as part of managing the intense anxiety throughout my whole life. It's called Adi Mudra, and the thumb comes into the palm, and the fingers wrap around the thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Adi means first, as in this is the first mudra. And again, if the hands aren't going there, think the hands there. And then the hands come down on the thighs
Palms up or
or
down?
down. So the knuckles, palms down, knuckles down, the elbows are long and open and but not forced and resting in this manner. So this is what it's funny with some people, they report feeling sedated after this practice, especially if we cultivate a long breath and then we cultivate a sound. And the sound we might use is just the long, drawn out sound of O while we visualize ourselves as being grounded and present. So it could be a visualization of ourselves or maybe a mountain or what have you. It could even just be a word. And so let's try it right now. We'll just do 3 rounds.
Okay, before we start,
Oh, sure.
let me ask a couple questions about technique because we can't see your elbows. So when you said elbows long, are the elbows near the ribs or the elbows wide? Wide or in?
It depends on where your hands are in relation to your body. So as I'm sitting in a cross-legged position on the floor, my elbows are a little further away from my body because my knees are further away. If I were sitting in a chair and my knees were directly in front of my hips, then my arms are going to be closer into the body. But I would say don't worry too much about it. Get where you can get, because maybe your hands are just resting on a tabletop and you look like this because there's not room. Or maybe your hands are in your lap because you're underneath, you're at work and you're under a table and you don't want anybody to know that you're practicing a mudra. Or maybe you're on an airplane. So it's, of course, technique can be important, but the cool thing is that the mudras still work as long as the arms, the most important thing I think is arms are soft rather than rigid. Some people really want to practice with rigid, almost hyperextension of the elbows, and that in its own way can be counterproductive to a hand gesture.
And viewers and listeners, teachers, for me, I have different hand flexibilities and muscle masses and postures from decades of practicing dentistry or even trying to play a musical instrument. So my hands close differently. So even if you don't have arthritic conditions or other disorders that may throw things out of whack, just being an average person may not be the same left and right. So Rose might be balanced, but at least in this element. So let's do what Rose is inviting us to do.
Yeah, so the thumbs are towards the palms of the hands, fingers wrapping around the thumbs in some fashion. It doesn't need to be tight. It could be tight, it could be very loose and looking something like this, and that's okay. The knuckle and the palm part of the hand is facing down. And then allow the eyes to soften. That might mean they're closed. That might mean you're just looking down. And find that image that represents grounding or stability or foundation. And it could be something from nature. Again, it could be simply the word grounded. And we'll use 3 rounds of the sound of O on the exhale, taking a deep breath in. Beautiful. Again. And one more time.
Rose, we lost your volume. You might have to replug.
Am I back?
You're back.
I'm back. Yay. So we'll pause for a moment, even after that interruption, and feeling how the feet are connecting to the earth, maybe how your seat is connecting to your chair, how the breath lands in the body. Noticing if perhaps you feel a little more grounded, present. And then inhale to the crown of the head, exhale to the soles of the feet. We can add a little affirmation. Inhale, I am to the crown, and exhale, here, or grounded to the feet. Do one more of those. And then when you're ready, allow the eyes to open.
And okay to release the hands, maybe palms up?
Absolutely. You can keep the hands in that position if you want as well.
Okay. I was getting sweaty.
Yeah, that happens.
And the O was very settling
Hmm.
if one could engage that.
Yeah.
Well, viewers and listeners, we've had an experiential pearl that we just threw on our strand over here. We'd love your feedback. Feel free to call in 919 518 9773. We do have working phones. We also have working Skype most of the time at Computers 2K Voice. And you can also log in on the chat box at the nissancommunications.com. We'll explore a little bit of Rose sharing the website and that information before we come to our formal second pearl, as time is melting away. So, Rose, would you share the website that you'd like folks to check into and any other contact information for now?
Sure. So the website is yogafordepression.com. That's FOR, the word, not the number. And so named after Amy Weintraub's book, Yoga for Depression. Uh, and on the website, we've got a plethora of resources, free videos, some audio downloads, tips for practice, as well as bigger resources like DVDs, CDs, and books. We also have a bi-monthly research newsletter. Our next issue should be coming out in the next week, which will feature a link to this video when it's up on YouTube.
This one.
This one right here. So lots of resources, and resources for people who are professionals, trainers, yoga teachers, mental health professionals, doctors, nurses, teachers of any sort. We offer training programs, and we're bumping up our online training programs as well. So there's a lot more to come. I'm busy at work, spending a couple hours every day working on more resources for people. So kind
Beautiful.
of touch everybody out there and gets tools to people so they can at least try them, right?
At least they know where it is
Hmm.
and it's effective. All they have to do is try it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of trying, viewers and listeners, how about if you settle for a moment and let's view the next pearl and see if you can try that one too.
Let's do a practice to soothe the tired juices of the mind. So we can do this by bringing one hand to the forehead and pressing the palm against the forehead. You could also pillow your forehead in your hands on a desk, or you could even do this in child pose if that's accessible to you. We'll be using the soothing sound of with the lips closed, maybe the teeth touch. So let's take a deep breath in, allow the eyes to soften. 2 more times. And as you allow the hand to release, maybe there's some residual effect of the vibration through the forehead. Maybe there's some tingling sensations in the palms of the hands and the fingertips. Maybe feeling a little more soothed or calmer in this moment. And taking a big breath in and out. And when you're ready, allow the eyes to open.
Interesting follow-up to the O that we just practiced and experienced. I had a different sensation, even though the vibration felt similar in a sense. My breathing capacity was different. And even just wondering, in having one hand, was there a difference of using right hand or left hand? Because sometimes we breathe or move with right first and left second. So any factors there?
Yes, so in terms of right, left, traditionally in India, you don't touch your face with your left hand because it's used for hygienic purposes. So the tendency is to do right hand to the face, which brings up an interesting thing. Often I do this in a child's pose. And um, so I would say whichever feels better is with whatever works, as the Yoga Sutras say, whatever works, go for
Mm-hmm.
that. And what we're really doing with these sounds is we're playing with the chakras or the energy centers. And so this one right here, the brow point, is all about cultivating clarity
Mm-hmm.
and intuition and helps to focus and calm, whereas O was for the root chakra, which helps us to ground, connect with stability, foundation, and security ultimately. So we just use two different sounds, and some people may have noticed a real difference and change. And of course, when we're touching here, that vibration bounces. The teeth can touch when doing that practice. But for some people, especially if they're dental issues, the teeth touching increases the intensity of the vibration in the mouth. And, if you've got jaw issues, sensitive teeth, that's not something that, and you'll know if that's something you want to practice or not. It's not. So
But-
again, being accessible for everybody because who knows what's a yes or what's a no until we try it and until we find the yes or the no. So,
and in the nuances of the hand positioning, where I was referring to an elevating of the center of the palm in this spider push-uppy
mhm.
element. Uh, Here, when the hand is on the head, are you thinking of palm pad, thumb pad, the suctional space of the center? How, what else might we use as a reference if it's even important?
The focus is really pressure. And I tried it with my fingertips and went, oh no, I want full pressure.
Okay.
So whatever touches and whatever creates that pressure, floor is going to be nicer, or a tabletop, or even, coming into this position is going to be a little nicer because you get more pressure. Sometimes we think of massaging the forehead,
Mm-hmm.
which is
And practitioners, just be mindful of jewelry that you're wearing because we're not trying to make any dents in the tissue.
exactly.
That's important. Well, speaking of dents in the tissue, we're making a nice dent in the tissue of the program, and we're going to be moving to our You Call This Yoga sponsor spot, sharing a little more detail about our upcoming Yoga Fest Raleigh in June. Please, if you're in the area or would like to learn more about our participants, visit our website, youcallthisyoga.org. Thank you, Amnon, for the next pearl or sponsor spot. You Call This Yoga presents Yoga Fest Raleigh. Join us each Saturday in June for morning yoga classes in cool and fun locations. Vendors and activities may be on site too. Here is Neomon Deli and Catering in West Raleigh, our location on June 24. Yoga Fest Raleigh supports free yoga in Southeast Raleigh at Chavis Park, Raleigh Teen Club, Brentwood Boys and Girls Club, and the Alliance Medical Ministry. Learn more and register today at etouches.com/YFRAL2017. Improve balance with yoga. It wasn't easy to get Lorraine to stand there for that picture, I can tell you.
That's what took so long.
That's what took so long. She had me move all around, and then finally, how's this lip look? Does it make me look chunky? Yeah. That's why we put the irregardless and well-fed garden truck behind it. So it slimmed her down. Red looks good on chickens, just so you know. We'll also be having Alicia, our gong master, at the well-fed garden. Egg production may increase significantly the next day. We'll see. Getting back to our mudras and vibrations, it was very fascinating to have the fingertips or the palm pad and all that mode there. For folks that have some physical challenges and even child's pose or the desk, what props might we consider to facilitate anyone that may have some physical limitations for these poses?
Great question. Blocks, pillows, bolsters stacked up. So maybe there's just a little dip in the forehead. And at the end of the day, of course, having that kind of massage to the forehead is nice, but it's not necessary for the sound to practice, for the sound to reverberate through the tissues and for the sound to make its effect. Sound is a way of focusing the mind and focusing the attention. And there's some research done on sound and how, just 10 minutes of internally repeating the sound of Om, so in the mind, not out loud, um, increased focus and memory skills in people. This was a study done many, many years ago in India, as opposed to people that use nothing for 10 minutes and were just focused on the breath. So sound doesn't even have to happen externally. It can happen internally, as we say. So there would be no external vocalization for people that don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, sound comes, especially any kind of toning, comes with caution for people with traumatic brain injury. Because for some people with traumatic brain injury, sound is really quite painful and can be disturbing. So, for those individuals, it might just be, well, I'll make the sound, and you can imagine you're making the sound, or make the sound internally, or even that we might both, in terms of working one on one, there might be no external sound because that can't be heard yet. And then on the other side of the spectrum, children really do like sound because it mimics some of the self-soothing. A lot of autistic individuals report loving sound practices, especially vocalized sound practices, because of the self-soothing that it initiates and that is needed. And you might fall anywhere on that spectrum at any given time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because the chakras are not necessarily a static element, and even the whole tuning cycle might fluctuate. Is that a fair gauge?
Yes.
It's almost like an instrument that is getting out of tune based on environmental settings, humidity, pressure. So that's part of what our bodies can be also, is we're essentially vehicles of vibration.
Exactly.
Oh boy, I better keep quiet now and get back to you. So 2002 or 3, or roughly that time, you take a class in a gym, you meet Amy Weintraub, your life is changing, and then now we're 15 years later. So we have about 15 minutes to try to span about the highlights of moderately 15 years. So how did the next 10 years proceed? How might your path have developed from that epiphany in your mid-20s?
Well, I was in school for getting a degree in sociology, and I did end up getting that degree in sociology with the intent to get a master's of social work and be a social worker. And I ended up taking a program. I was also I had a double degree with religious studies. and I ended up going to Taiwan and taking a Buddhist program in Taiwan for a month in the summer and doing my yoga practice every day. And the group said, "Oh, let's do a yoga class, but you teach it because you're the one that has the most consistent practice." So
Mm.
I did. And uh, I never felt more like myself than I did in that moment. And I came home like, okay, I'm going to do a yoga teacher training and I'm going to make this happen and make it now. So my last semester of college, I was I had that dream schedule. I had class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I took my yoga teacher training concurrently with my final semester of college, and got my degree. And um, instead of going to the big school at the University of Arizona, which is quite large, instead of going to that graduation, I was in my YTT graduation, taking my final exams and so on and so forth. And from then on, I graduated on a Sunday and I subbed my first class on a Monday. And I just was, this is it. And of course, with any yoga training, there's a lot of growth and skills that need to be developed that aren't necessarily imparted during the program itself. And so at that point, then Amy brought me in as helping her mailing things out, because now there was this book and a CD, and I helped there. And then she wanted to do a program in Tucson, our training program, and so I helped her with that. And then there I was teaching in that program and getting, on the spot feedback and support and refinement in terms of my teaching. So I haven't, sometimes as yoga teachers, we teach in a vacuum, so our students love what we teach, but they don't often have constructive feedback for us. I didn't like that, or when you said this, it made me feel like this. And I desperately needed that support to shift my language from, you need to, I want you, to let's try, invite this, welcome this. So for basically the last, well, I've been a teacher since 2005, so for the last 12 years of my teaching life, there's been somebody there coaching me and guiding me along the way, helping me to make my language more accessible, supporting me through making my cues more precise.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, uh, I can be I can yammer on and on and on and on. And so helping me rein that in so that it's a concise sentence rather than a big sentence. And of course, students help with that. If they're not understanding the direction, it's okay, let me go back to the drawing board with that direction and come up with something that you can understand and doesn't make you have questions and doesn't make you look up at me and go, wait, what are we doing now? So that's basically been my process. And this past year, I've taken over as the director of LifeForce Yoga. So we've had this transition where Amy was my boss, and now I'm Amy's boss. And I think we're managing that very, very well. The lines of communication are open, and we use the practice not just personally, but professionally.
Mm.
And that's made a huge difference because a lot of people might use their practice personally, but not in a professional setting. And, um, the way we talk to each other is the way we might talk to a student
Mm-hmm.
or someone we love, and not as somebody who's an underling or somebody who has to do what we need them to do. So it's open lines of communication, and I'm proud of us.
Beautiful. Well, let's clarify for our viewers and listeners. It's yogafordepression.com. You'll open the pages. You'll see an abundance of Amy Weintraub, who is in collaboration / contractual agreement with Rose Kress. So they are both part of the LifeForce Yoga element that is sharing wisdom and practices throughout the world. Lots of free materials on the website. This is a mother load, emphasis on mother, not carrying an LOAD, but an LODE of experience and other insights, because they're doing scrutiny of researched materials out there, trying to bring clarity to what the perceptions of the yoga experience might be. Speaking of what might be, it might be time for our third pearl of wisdom from Rose. So let's settle in as we float this one by you. Thank you, Amnon.
Come into a seated position for the practice of stair-step breath to energize. Allow the eyes to soften, and we'll imagine as though we're taking a gondola ride to the top of a mountain through the nostrils. And when you get to the top, pause and take little steps down the mountain through the nostrils. Beautiful. Let's do that again. Taking a gondola ride to the top. And again, pausing at the top of the mountain, and see something that brightens your spirits. And little steps down. Let's do that again. Taking that gondola ride to the top. Pausing at the top to see that image that brightens your spirit. And little steps down. Beautiful. You can continue if you wish, or let that go, and let's take a big breath in to the crown of the head, and a big exhale out to the soles of the feet. This time add I am as you breathe to the head, and here as you breathe to the feet. When you're ready, allow the eyes to open.
Viewers and listeners, I particularly enjoy this technique because it's something somehow I managed to practice for years without thinking of it as an energizing element, but I think of it as almost a balancing element because I was doing that while doing aerobic exercise. It wasn't so definitive for me in the, but it was a softer, almost parasympathetic or calming ratio of inhale to exhale while I was exerting, whether it be running or, like I say, the elliptical. And I found that it helped my endurance while doing the aerobics. Not that you have to run out and do this right away, but I would suggest exploring that it might be more than a statically positioned opportunity. It can even happen in walking. Can you invite the calm while you're inviting the energy? And Rose, that was totally spontaneous for me. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I love hearing that. And to let watcher viewers and listeners know that this is an adaptation of a practice, Anuloma and Viloma Krama, which is the interruption of the breath, and to make it a little more accessible to the average person. So there is one where we're sniffing, stepping up and sliding down, and then combining the two as a means of, you know, when we're working with people, and this may also resonate with some of you who are with us today, is that if we're not breathing, there's probably a really good reason for why you're not breathing. You may be holding the breath or holding something back. And stair step as a whole practice is one that we use on as an introduction to LifeForce yoga, because if you start taking deep breaths, you might emotionally flood. Stuff may come up. And if that happens the first time, that's scary. I mean, of course, we want those things to come up and over time, but it may not be appropriate to do that the first time, second time, even the third time. And so this is a practice then that helps us to cultivate a little breath, but also not go too deep too fast. And that's really what we're seeing these days with mood and in LifeForce yoga and people we're working with is let's not go too deep too fast. because we do want you to stay and we do want you to practice. And we'll go deep slowly, but at the client, the patient, the student's level rather than my agenda. It's up to them to guide us when we're going deeper. So, and then adding visualization to anything has these wonderful benefits. Um, let's add it to every yoga pose. I mean, you can kind of overdo it, but adding imagery, of course, there's research about imagery and how imagery helps us to heal and helps us to feel better. And certain imagery releases oxytocin, which is that bonding hormone that makes us feel better and more resilient and may protect us against trauma, our response to trauma, as opposed to, the traumas in world and life still happen, but how we respond to it can change based on our biochemistry.
Yes. At this accessible yoga conference this past weekend, I took a 2-hour program on breathing and imagery, and even adding a color to the potential location if we're trying to address parts of our body or psyche or whatever the emotion is, that can we foster a change in the impression of what that color is to even a more soothed or potentially even activated element. So that's been very insightful. And I encourage our viewers and listeners to go to the Yoga for Depression website for resources about that. I also have great experience this weekend at the accessibleyoga.org entity, where there's also a plethora of practitioners who are sharing their passions. And there'll be other affiliates of the Accessible Yoga organization on our show in the future. But now we have Rose on, so let's stay with LifeForce as I come back to her. Rose, any training programs that are coming up in the near future with you, Amy, both?
Yeah, we have an online learning program that is always available. It's available on demand, and it's under the training heading, and it's called Online Learning. We also have a 7-day program coming up at Kripalu from the 9th through the 16th, which is always a joy. And then there's one at Yogaville. And then, of course, when the rest of the country is cold and it's winter time, we've got one in January in Tucson when the weather last year we had a couple of cool days, but we ended up with the last couple of days at 70 degrees and sunny because wintertime in Tucson does not suck. So we're always here in January. It'll be towards the end of January. And then again, there's some online programs in development. Probably the next one will launch in August. I've got to write the manual for that online program. So I'm working on that not in this moment, but as we speak.
Well, who knows? We might be creating content for it live on the air. Viewers and listeners, here's your last chance to check in with Rose, 919-518-9773. Or you could type in on the chat box. We're done with Skype, and no more Skyping today. No more Skype for you. And that's yogafordepression.com. Rose and her team, Amy Weintraub, at Kripalu in Massachusetts, Yogaville in Northern Virginia, online 24/7. Thank you, Rose, for sharing your insights, perspectives, and journey with us. It's thrilling to have experienced this, and it's very enriching for me.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share my passion with your viewers and the world.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Viewers and listeners, coming up, we have Dr. Steve Landau Pashupati, who has been focusing on yoga in the prisons in North Carolina for many years. He's done research study. He's actually retired from his practice and doing a lot of seva work in Greensboro. He's also a musician, and we'll have some interesting and inspiring experiences with Pashupati. In the meantime, for your regional experiences, we have Yoga Fest Raleigh coming up. You can visit our website, youcallthisyoga.org. Our mission is to help the physically challenged and underserved improve their life with yoga. Feel free to reach out on our contact to reach out to me. We welcome your viewing and critiquing of the show. You can visit this in our on-demand You Call This Yoga for all of our shows from January. Thank you again to Rose, to Amy for the development of LifeForce Yoga and your perpetuation of healing throughout the world. To all that are viewing, we thank you, Rose. Namaste.
Thank you.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.